Welcome to Holistically Speaking. I'm Hilary Russo, certified holistic health coach and health and wellness journalist. This is an empowering place to explore self-awareness, self-love, and transformation through health, healing, and humor. By sharing life-changing experiences, knowledge, and guests with varied expertise, we'll explore who we are, how we got that way, and what it takes to be a happy and healthy grown-up. Mind, body, and spirit. I'm glad you're here. What comes to mind when you think of the word inclusive? What resonates with you? Think about it for a moment. We've been hearing it a lot lately, haven't we? But it's more than just an office buzzword. It's a feeling, a mindset. And it's up to each and every one of us to not just understand it, but be it with ease. We've also seen a lot of positive action through art, a way to express inclusivity. How beautiful that is when we are given a chance to ask questions, challenge ourselves, and have engaging conversations, sometimes uncomfortable ones. Leaning into the discomfort is where the change happens. For Ashwini Prasad, this hits close to home. Her work as an anti-racist educator and screenwriter didn't just manifest out of nowhere. She understands oppression and racism as someone who may look different from the quote-unquote norm. So she dedicates her work to the change and has been for quite some time. Her pillars were rooted in college. Her screenplays focus on bringing people who are erased and marginalized onto our screens. Her recent book, How to Write Inclusively, an analysis and how-to guide, provides possibilities. And the recent launch of her podcast, Inclusive Storytelling, is hoping to do even more, because there is always more we can do. So here we are, cross country, and
Yes.
I'm here on the East Coast, you're on the West Coast, and it is so great that we can connect this way. I love when we get a chance to talk to each other. How are you? What's new and good?
Oh, hi. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. All is well. I know I love that the fact that I'm making even more friends in New York. So the next time when it's safe to come visit, I have lots of lunch buddies, and you are on the top of my list.
Girl, I accept the invitation before it even
Yes.
happens,
Yes.
because this is, we connected virtually to begin with through a mastermind group through LinkedIn. And it's amazing how people do connect, and what we find with those who are aligning with our own mission, even though their missions are very distinct and personal. I found just in doing the podcast that there are so many stories out there. And when I learned more about you, and the fact that you are pursuing this passion of inclusive storytelling, I'm like, oh, I just want to hold space for you to share that story. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you again. It's going to be exciting. I'm really looking forward to talking more. And exactly, once you're able to take these different opportunities, like you said, like joining a mastermind, who knows who you'll meet. And exactly, like you and I share a lot of the basics, for me, basics, reframing, values, where we want to head. And even though we do, again, distinct things, like you're saying, I'm a screenwriter, anti-racism, anti-oppression educator, but we never have to question or talk to each other or explain each other, because we're really on the same page when it comes to what's important to us. So I love that.
Yeah. And that I want to touch on that. I mean, you have experience in the corporate world and working as an anti-racist educator. And is it, how does someone fall into that line of work?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think one thing is when you have been quoted as being diversity within diversity, that'll really help your mindset. So let me explain what that means. I was born in Fiji. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and Vancouver, BC, and have spent a lot of time in Oregon. And so it's a lot of different things. And so I am usually recognized more of my ethnicity than what I consider myself as a woman, because when I wake up in the morning, I got to go to the bathroom. So I'm reminded every single morning that I I am a woman identifying person before anything else,
Meaning you
right?
don't have to stand up when you pee.
Exactly. Exactly. So for me, it's like, look, I look at myself as a woman, whereas the world doesn't. So
Mm.
when the world has always looked at me in the ways that they want to perceive me, here I am. And so I've always kind of been that person. I grew up with a lot of different folks. So that word diversity was, I would say, more in terms of ethnic diversity, would be more. It was more nuanced for me. It was something that was just normal day to day. I didn't have to look at it as much. I also went to a high school where they had a special ed program. So neurodiverse folks and folks with varying abilities were people that I would share the hallway with. So it wasn't something that was out of the norm for me.
Mm.
And so I will say, though, when I went to college, the things that I was taking for granted in terms of how other people's lives and how they were perceived in the world and their lived experience is where it really came to in front of my eyes. So I went from my periphery in front of my eyes. And what that meant was I took a class in the winter term of college, only had one more term to go. And I took a class that was called Ethics of Diversity, but it should have been called Philosophy of Oppression.
Hmm.
It was a backcourt class. And we talked about the moral harms of oppression, how we should be in this world. And it was, the course that really literally changed the course of my life. And it also, again, it took all these items and oppressions and just hardships that I have faced, and I was able to give a name to it, and then also have empathy, or at least sympathy, for other folks' experiences that based on my privilege, the ability to go to college, my gender, what I identified as, my sexual orientation, that these were all privileges that other folks did not have. And that really helped shape my life. And I actually went ahead and did a master's after that, and my master's thesis was focused on that course.
Isn't that something? What an so interesting. I mean, look, I'm learning about new things about you, and I've been in the room with you many a times. We learn about each other and the projects we're working on. So I always sit here in awe when something new comes into my presence, and I learn about friends and folks that come on the podcast. But what an incredible journey! So here in this world of being an anti-racist educator, you've actually, it's opened your eyes to a lot of things as far as like your background, really loving the arts and being very connected to the arts. It kind of moved you into this realm of wanting to do more, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly right. So I'm going to take you and our listeners back a little bit. I remember, this is so funny. It makes me laugh when I think about it. I remember being 10 years old and telling my immigrant parents that it didn't matter if I was a starving artist. And at 10, I had this idea that because you were an artist, you had to be starving, which is absolute nonsense, right? But I remember telling them it didn't matter as long as you're following your heart. So that didn't go well. And, it strikes me that, 30 plus years later, I still remember that conversation. And so in high school, I did theater, absolutely loved it. I did it in college. Even though I was given experiences to act, I didn't take folks up on it. I was given one of the lead roles in a high school play. And even after my drama teacher tried to talk me into the role, after I said no, I still was a stagehand and kind of was in the shadows, in the dark. And then when I took my theater courses in college, I remember my college teacher was like, I have the perfect role for you. Come audition for the spring play. And I didn't. So fast forward to 3 masters later, 2 of them in the liberal arts and focused on anti-racism and anti-oppression work, and then 1 in business because I was like, oh crap, what am I going to do next? And I thought I was going to be a philosophy professor. That did not happen. And I was, I'm destined for other things. And so I got the 3 masters, went to work at nonprofits. And in 2013, I was just pretty fed up. I was like, okay, what do I do to take my project management, business consulting, analyst skills, and how can I apply it maybe at an art museum or somewhere where I could merge it. And, that was frustrating, job changes. And then in 2016, just happened to end up meeting a whole bunch of musicians, yogis, and artists.
Were they starving?
No, I can't say they were all starving. That's a great question. That's so funny. No. And so I ended up being inspired, and I wrote my first spoken word piece in decades. And it took me less than an hour to actually write it. The words literally just flowed out of me. And it was basically a piece that summarized everything I've just said in the last 3 minutes or so. And I performed it. And it was the first time I'd been on stage in almost 20 plus years. And I absolutely love the stage.
Oh, now you do.
I always have. I'm learning to come back to it.
Do you think part of that was that you were just owning your story? That part of it was that it wasn't performing someone else's work that required memorizing lines, that required being a character, but you were really just being yourself?
I think so. No matter what, there's always a piece that you bring into a piece of art, a script. I think it was just time for me to tell the story. It was time for me to put it out there for the world, for people to understand and consume, and also inspire. Because the second time I did my spoken word piece, a young woman came up to me and was like, I feel like you were telling my story up there, and thanked me. And as a performer, like, what greater compliment is, somebody being able to come up to you and thank you and know that for me, that I impacted this young woman's life in that moment. There's no greater compliment.
Totally. I get that a lot. There's actually a quote, and I know I've used it on the podcast before, but one day your story will be someone else's survival guide, pretty much paraphrase. But so that's it. Like, the minute you touch one soul, the minute you throw back one starfish, as I love to say, it's like, you just never know. And sometimes you never know who that person is. That person could be the audience, walk out, and they're like, that was freaking amazing. You might never meet them, but you touch them and maybe they'll touch someone else. So that whole idea of telling your story, and if you're not happy with your story, change the narrative. It's still your story. Is very empowering.
Even decades later, it really is never too late if you want to put that time and effort, and you want to put it out there. I think there's a lot of people who give up. I know people who I really have given up, and it's like, gosh, no, it's not too late. Like, don't say that. I've been with those conversations with people. They're like, oh no, oh maybe, and their eyes fall to the ground, and it's like, nope, you are denying yourself in this moment. And how big you want it is up to you in terms of what you're embracing. But follow it, because you will feel things. You will feel like something's missing. You will feel that voice. You will be, attracted to different things. You'll be inspired. So you got to follow those feelings. Like, I do the weirdest things. This is pre-COVID and definitely will be post-COVID. But when I go to the theater, it doesn't matter what stage, whether it's a small production theater or at Cirque du Soleil, I'll actually go to the stage and touch it. And I kind of have to, shimmy my way and get, make sure security is not thinking I'm going to do something like jump on stage. But I literally touch the stage because I love it so much.
It's a connection.
Yes.
It's a connection. I get it. I mean, that was my background. I was a theater minor in college and then did professional theater for a number of years when I took a break from the news industry. And there is such a connection you have with that environment. And when I do my work, when I do my havening work, one thing I always do when I share with my clients, when we're going into that first state of just breathing and relaxation, I tell them, close your eyes, pretend like you're backstage in the proscenium, you're behind it, because so much magic happens in that that pleasant distraction moment where you're creating the scene on your own, right? So
Exactly.
I get it. And I've touched many of Broadway stages, and I've probably been escorted out numerous times.
Yeah.
so,
and
so
and whatever it is for that person,
yeah,
maybe it's like, touching paper books because you don't
yeah.
want to read off of a Kindle. Maybe it's going into nature. Maybe it's petting an animal. Whatever that is,
Mm.
I encourage people to go and feel it. And like we were talking about earlier, what better time than during a pandemic when we're not running around as much?
That definitely hits on a point right there, because I was just going to ask you about that. Here you are in the line of work that you do, and you've been really branching out, and you are in the process of launching this new podcast, the Inclusive Storytelling, and just, having a lot of time at home to think and hopefully grow. And what would you say your takeaway has been for you during this time before we start talking about the podcast? What is the biggest
Yeah.
takeaway?
Oh gosh.
And if there's
How
more
much
than
time?
one, yay.
Yeah, how much time do you have? One thing that was really big for me is when I started screenwriting, I knew that I wanted to tell the stories of those that have been forgotten from history. Um, and I knew that's what I was going to write about. I knew I was going to showcase to the world people like the Sifis, or the English way of saying it is sepoys, which were World War I soldiers from South Asia and from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Nepal. And they were called the Sifis or sepoys. And 1.3 million of them served under the quote unquote British Empire. So we don't hear about them. And I was shocked at that number. 400,000 of them were Muslims, and 75,000 of them died. So that's a huge sacrifice from a huge group. And so I started learning about these different folks. And people might know about Frida Pinto's next work is going to be about Noor Khan. And I learned about Noor Khan while I was doing my research about those people I wanted to write about. And Noor Khan was a World War II spy, and she literally lived the spy life. And she was executed at Dhaka. And so I'm finding about all these different people that were South Asians or Asians. And I'm like, wait a minute, why aren't they household names? Or why did I never learn about them? And, it just really upset me. And so that was the motivation to do that. And then I was just thinking about how much the world needed this anti-racism, anti-oppression work in entertainment. Because because of my previous education and experiences, I see things in our media that maybe other people just don't pick up on or did not pick up on prior to May of 2020. And so I was seeing these things for the previous 20 years. Again, that class brought things that were in my periphery to right in front of my eyes that I could not deny anymore when it came to the amount of systemic racism and oppression that is around the world. And so I knew that because of how powerful media is, as you know, and how it influences and shapes culture, that I could provide value by telling these different folks' stories. And so when I started writing, I was like, I'm going to get the screenplay, going to get it made. And then COVID hits, and it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do next? So I actually finished 2 more scripts in that time. And I was thinking about the gap that's in what I was finding when I was doing my research as a screenwriter, right? Because you should always be mastering your craft. Doesn't matter what your craft is. If you enjoy it and it moves you, master it. Find everything you can possibly can to go ahead and learn about the different ways that you can get better. And so I was like, gosh, there are so many books on screenwriting, but there's very little about how to write inclusively. And so it was like there's a big, huge gap. And now, there's a big, huge opportunities for people who want to self-publish. So I started writing a book in June of 2020. And originally, it was meant to be a guide, a practical guide, a how-to on how to write inclusively for screenwriters. Again, mixing my talents, right, from understanding structures, my anti-racism space, and then being a screenwriter. And I was like, okay, well, here we go. Let's write a book. And so I wrote a book about how to write inclusively. It's an analysis and how-to guide for screenwriters, writers, and the feedback I'm getting is, again, those practical applications, the how-tos can be applied in anybody's life. And because it is just about relationships and how to get to know people. And that was huge for me. And, that's what I did. And then it morphed into the next steps of, okay, I got my scripts. I'm building these amazing relationships in the entertainment world and the arts. I got this book now. And it's like, well, what's the next way that I can definitely be able to provide value to folks and get the word out on what inclusivity looks like in the arts? And that's when I thought about the podcast, and lo and behold, magic, meet a distributor, meet a video editor, and, now I'm waiting to launch. So it's
so exciting.
It's interesting. It's interesting, right? What happens when you just take a deep breath and you have some time.
And you just let go and let it happen, right?
Yes.
It's amazing because I've known you not for too long, but I've watched you create and manifest that which you want to manifest, which has been this podcast, and also hearing about the book as well. Let me ask you this you mentioned there's not a lot of people in this space that are doing inclusive storytelling. You must have some that inspire you, even if they're outside of that area. Do you have filmmakers or storytellers that have inspired you on this journey?
Oh, yeah. So it's not that people aren't doing inclusive storytelling or have not been. It's about what is hitting our screens or hitting our different mediums, because what we talk about is that there's gatekeepers, and the gatekeepers, because of what we've seen historically, have not been very open to the stories like that I give or other folks give. So I want to be clear, definitely lots of inclusive storytelling has been happening.
More so now than ever. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my
Thankfully.
goodness. Yeah, and I love seeing it, and I love seeing the representation, and I absolutely love different folks that are moving into influential positions in publishing, in entertainment, pretty sure in journalism, that, are not of the norm in terms of what we've seen historically in these leadership positions. And hopefully they can open doors or open opportunities for a lot of other folks that traditionally have not been brought into the fold and had this exposure that other folks had the privilege and benefit. So in terms of who I learned from, gosh, I mean, there's a whole list. Like Mira Nair has been Mississippi Masala's director. She's been doing this work and advocating for, let us tell our stories. And I'm a huge fan of tell your stories, research the rest. And Mira really influences me and always has with the work that she's done, because I haven't seen a lot of South Asian directors outside of Bollywood. And a lot of the work that I see, and the greats, like the Denzels of the world, always love seeing him on stage. Samuel Jackson, Spike Lee, they've been grinding.
Yeah,
gosh,
definitely.
They've been grinding for so long. Always inspired by folks like that. Olivia Butler is huge for me in the sci-fi world, and even Gene Roddenberry. I mean, gosh, talk about a visionary.
Yeah. Going back too, like going back when there were a lot of questions being asked. Yeah.
Yes. And all the, the controversy about the first inter-ethnic, interracial, inter-ethnic kiss. But what an amazing way of looking at the world, of having these different groups, but they're quote unquote alien, but we still have to interact with them. I mean, talk about a metaphor, for the world. And of course, being inspired by the Toni Morrisons and Maya Angelou's of the world. And also, South Asian culture, for so long, I denied it because I was, more going towards a dominant culture. But now I embrace and am trying to learn. I'm learning, about all these different aspects of my culture that I chose not to embrace when I was younger. And so I would say it's a lot of that, a lot of those influences. And my parents would listen to Hindi music, and so just focused in on how that would have shaped my worldview as well, and instead of denying it, embracing it. So I've been blessed, to be surrounded by a lot of different types of storytelling, because music is definitely storytelling.
Mhm.
Now for me, it's navigating the spaces to be like, okay, so what's next, and how can I provide value and showcase it and allow all these different experiences to truly inform who I am more than I am today.
And part of who you are is your environment. So even though you left Fiji as a child, an infant, right? You were only there for a very short amount of time, not really influenced
One and
by,
a half.
yeah, you're
Yeah,
not
not
really
influence.
very influenced by the culture of Fiji, but your parents being from Fiji and then bringing you to the States and living your life in the States and also Canada. How prominent was it in your upbringing, even if you weren't so actively embracing it?
Well, it was definitely there. I've always felt a key distinction in terms of the community based that I lived in. So being around my family and my cousins and their cousins is very normal. Um, I grew up with my cousin's cousins as well as my cousin. And it's like, well, cousins, aren't they like, I don't know. Are they first removed, second removed? I no idea what these things are, but they were never my cousin's cousins. They were my cousins, period. And it's always community based. And even though I wasn't entrenched in the community, I knew that there was a distinct difference in terms of how I grew up and how other people grew up. And I will say that in general, for Asians, community based thinking, community based living is the forefront. It's very much, you have households that have grandparents that live with you versus just maybe the immediate family of parents or legal guardians and children, whatever dynamic that looks like, not just heterosexual couples. So I knew that, and I knew it was different. And I knew that my food was different, quote unquote, and not different. I think back then it would have been like, oh, you kind of want to hide it for a little bit. But, I didn't eat things that were in my lunch cafeteria. Those weren't normal food that I had at home. It was different because it was Fijian, Indian-based food. And I remember when I was little, when my grandma would come, she would bring Indian clothes, she would, and bring Fijian dresses. We would have little seashells in our homes that you would find souvenirs in Fiji, but you also find them in the homes. So there was just all these different artifacts growing up where they were definitely not part of the dominant culture.
So now have you been back to Fiji at all?
I have not. I've not gone back since I was 6. I have only been to India once. So
that's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Well, now both are, really.
Let me know. I'll hook you up with places
sweet.
and people to talk to in case you need to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, no, and it was wonderful. But it's interesting too when you're a South Asian, for me, that's lived not in India or in Fiji, and because there's so many folks, it's like, when we're told to go back home, it's like, what are you talking about? We lived here, and that's what happens to folks. They're told to go back home. And it's interesting because it's like, well, there's really nowhere else that we know. This is our home. And when I was in India, I was traveling with some folks, and one Indian man asked my travel partner where I'm from, and or where I'm from, or like, is she Indian, something like that. And my travel partner was like, yeah, she's Indian. And the guy was like, no, she's not. She doesn't walk like an Indian. So I'm in India. My ancestry is in India, but I don't walk like an Indian. So, think like, it's like, okay, there's a lot to unravel there, just in.
Yeah.
But those have been my experiences, right?
Yeah. And I'm curious in this, with all that you've just been, all that's surrounded you in your life, and kind of going back to what what this show is about. We talk a lot about mental health. How has that impacted you emotionally, coming from a different country, moving to living in three countries, really? You were in Fiji and then the US and Canada, and looking different and being okay being who you are, but not really embracing your story. And I'm just curious, how did that really impact you emotionally in different phases of your
Yeah,
life?
no, that's a great question. I would say in my younger years, youngish years, so I would say, as a child and as a teenager, it was very much denial, like just not even thinking about it. You just kind of were living through life and living through trying to graduate, trying to deal with school drama and people and, childish immaturities and just being in a school that just wasn't very helpful and conducive in terms of being safe. And so I think it didn't really click to me in terms of that safety piece or mental health, because it was just kind of like, let's get through this. It was more of a survival mode versus really thinking about it. And then, of course, family dynamics gets layered into that. So I would say in the high school years and as a child, it was more about survival. In the 20s, it got to be more destructive. So I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic, but I definitely had my fun in college. Let's put it that way, right? Not an atypical experience at all. Very typical kind of college experience, but definitely staying out late and lots of partying. That was definitely my life. So I would say not facing, the things that could do better and just working towards goals. So whether it was school or getting that job or moving up in terms of how much money I was going to make. And then you hit your 30s and that,
Oh, yeah.
and that's when definitely when I hit 30, 31, the cycle of looking at the people that were in my life, the relationships I was having, both platonic and romantic, and being able to just really take a step back and just being like, what do I want the rest of my life to look like? And the way I describe about 31 to maybe 37 would literally be the universe put me in the washer and then the dryer and spat me out on laying naked in a ditch, bloody and beaded, like just beaten.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the way I would describe the majority of my 30s. And so that was, I didn't break necessarily, but I had a really rough time in my 30s. But it was what I needed to kind of almost, uncleanse is coming, but that's not necessarily the word. It's more of a getting rid of what wasn't serving me, getting rid of what isn't going to move me forward. Definitely mindset, which I still continue to focus on. And I'm reminded every day how much more work I need to do in terms of my mindset. And so do
you have a practice?
Yeah, every day it's about being thankful, being in that gratitude.
Yeah, gratitude always.
Yeah. And just,
it does make a difference.
It does. And I have a full belly. I have more than what other people have. I still have a retirement. I see more than one post of folks that have burned through their retirement because they got unemployed. Unemployment was not enough. And they're trying to figure out their family. So gosh, I can't imagine trying to start 45, 50 years old and you're having to rebuild your retirement. Gosh, what is that going to look like for folks? So I think that's, for me, it's been quite the journey of my 30s really helped me get the practices that I needed in terms of being grateful. I think back to some of the language I used to use about myself and others. And it's like, oh gosh, no. And I would still catch myself doing it. But it's like, okay, now that I know better, I can do better, right? The famous Maya Angelou quotation that I'm butchering right now. But I still have, the days where it's like, oh, crap, or that negative self-talk can definitely overpower me. And I've had my days where it's beautiful and I'm under the covers sleeping.
Yeah.
But
We're all there.
yeah.
Yeah, we all have our moments,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we have to keep ourselves in check because, I mean,
Mhm.
that lovely head of ours loves to go into fight or flight mode, and curl up in fetal
Exactly.
position.
That's right, that's
It's
right. It's a
we
beautiful
just
day on a noon on a Saturday, and I'm just like, "I'm going to
right.
bed."
Yeah.
But, some days I know that, and I take that, and then the next day, I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like, it was just a moment, and it's sadness, it's not anything, it's a very human thing, and luckily, it's
Yeah.
not depression for me, and we need to be caring for folks, especially right now, that are having much more troubled times than I am. And I would also say, as we're talking about mental health, it is that gratitude. And also, what I love is that I have folks that understand unhealthy choices, but also understand positive toxicity. And people who are able to help me, including you, where it's like, let's go into a negative space and it's okay. And then what do we do to get out of it? Just don't dwell there. But you do need to embrace these emotions. Don't fly away negative emotions, or what we say are negative, or maybe not as fruitful. But they're just emotions, right? They're trigger points in terms of understanding yourself. And if we can take the judgment away, we can then move forward. And I think knowing people like you, and other people who understand that balance has been so helpful for me, because I'm not going to go into an extreme where it's like these emotions are going to bring me down and affect many of my days versus just maybe a few hours, to folks that are like, oh, don't worry about it. There's always a silver lining, because sometimes you just don't want to hear a silver lining.
Like, feel into your feeling. And first of all, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I mean, that's my mission, but it's a reminder to myself too, And I think the first step in anything when we're in that negative place is awareness. If we're not aware of it, it's hard to really move to the next step, which is allowing your feelings to happen. And then in that's where you align with the kind of feelings you want to exhibit and feel. So, yeah, I get it. And thank you for sharing that. But I'm glad that you're seeing that on your own,
Yeah, well, like I said, it's
Yeah.
the people who you surround yourself by.
Yes. I have a word of the year, which you've heard before. This year it's a line. Do you have a word this year?
Oh, not yet for this year, but my word for 2020 was relationships.
Yeah.
My goodness, the amount of relationships I gained around the world in 2020, because we finally embraced this webinar technology,
Mhm.
and began to understand how quickly we can build relationships with people all around the world, and how to stay connected, even though it may not be as ideal as the hug or the face to face, but we can still meet and stay connected. And like we were talking about earlier, can't wait for lunch in New York
Mhm.
City, with all these new friends that are literally less than a year old in terms of my connection with them. But the connection is so deep that I know that I can be like, hey, I'm coming. And people will be like, okay, cool. This is my schedule.
Do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Especially post-COVID, where we're like, "Get me out of my
Exactly.
house." We're gonna be accepting invitations to just about anything.
And I think a part of it too is like, these relationships is what's fantastic, and that these
Mhm.
relationships have been able to be nurtured even though we're not, a 10-minute drive or a 10-minute walk away. That's
Yeah.
huge, to be able to have like these friendships that really are friendships that started virtually, still continue to be virtually, and being able to see each other is just going to be a plus. It's not going to
Mhm.
be the reason why a relationship is able to flower.
Definitely. I'm kicking myself that I never bought stock in Zoom.
Yeah, right?
I'm like, I didn't know any better. I was using it every once in a while to, like, join other people's
Yeah,
conversations. Now I use it as a college professor. I
right?
I use it with, every meeting I have because I wanna see people. I wanna connect with them, even with this podcast, even though we're an audio base, and I could record the video, just being able to see you
Mhm.
and, not record that portion, but see you just is a connection we need. We need human connection. So I get it. My words in 2020 were actually connect and create, unknown of what was going to happen 2 months into into the
Right,
year. Right.
right.
I feel like I've done more connecting and creating in
Mhm.
2020. And you would think, oh no, this is so bad. We're not going to do anything. And we've done so much more. We're open to it. Right.
Yeah. Most
many people
folks, I
are.
would think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It
definitely.
forces you to think like that.
Absolutely. Would you say you're a huge history buff? I would imagine you are.
I do. I do. I enjoy it. I can't say like I know every single, tip that's out there, but I do enjoy history. Yes, I enjoy learning about it.
Yeah,
I also really enjoy learning about the different ways history is interpreted, actually. You know,
which we need to be open to.
Yes, yes. There was when I was writing my first feature movie. There, I did a lot of research on World War One, and so I actually there's a movie out from 1979. The name is completely escaping me right now, but it actually tells the World War One or World War Two story from the I think it's World War Two from the German perspective. So that was
Oh,
fascinating. Yeah,
interesting.
that was fascinating to watch. And there's definitely a human story around it. And they talk about was it Father Germany, and usually we think of it like Mother Russia, or
Mother,
yeah,
yeah,
but they use the term father, and so it's so interesting. So that's I love that, and I love that. And so what I'm able to do, just like with my news, what's consistent, what are people saying consistently across the different biases? Let's be real, there's biases with different historical publications. What's the same? And then being able to kind of take that as much as a factoid as I can. And I think also, not I think, I know, is I also realize that these different versions have been written by folks that had their own agendas, right? We don't hear much about how the peasants lived in the 14th or 12th century. No, we know about the monarchs because their day to day survived. But what about the peasants? And so I try to be very aware of what I am not able to take in because it just wasn't recorded or was not passed down through the oral traditions, and I've missed out on and may never know about because of what's currently out there in terms of the content.
I couldn't agree with you more. First of all, I'm a huge history buff, and
Yeah.
I love war movies. I mean, I don't know how is that weird, but
No.
I love war movies. I love movies about anything that is a struggle and the power, and being myself, coming from an interfaith home, and half my family's Jewish,
Hmm.
and knowing that there's family that perished in the Holocaust. I mean, those
Yeah.
stories, we hearing the true stories of, I mean, obviously the importance of leadership and the hierarchy is important, but also learning about those who are living every day for their lives,
Yes.
is just very empowering. So I love the twist of stories that are taken from a different perspective. Uh, I love the underdogs anyway. I'm a big fan of the underdogs and the runts of the litter.
Well, for me,
So
for me, it's important. I've dedicated my Instagram to bringing back
yeah,
those that have been erased or marginalized from history.
yeah, I love that.
That's literally my Instagram. You were on Instagram together, and
Yeah.
that's it's one of the reasons why I'm on this earth is to tell these stories. And but it's just fun, like when I post about them, it's not work for me to go and find
Mhm.
out about these different folks. It's literally fun. I enjoy sharing the stories, and I get to learn. And it's just really a lot of fun. It's really good, and it's a value, right? My goal is to provide value to folks, and with my anti-oppression, anti-racism background, it just slides right in that telling these stories of people that I want other folks that hopefully find value and other folks should know about. That's just service to the world. And that's going back to what we were talking about, what moves you and how other folks can find this for themselves. It really is, what moves you. And some people I've talked
Mm.
to are like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, what moved you as a child? Go back and explore that. I tell people, right now you can find lots of things on YouTube that are around what you loved as a child, and see what you can do to get into it. And if you find yourself immersing in it again, follow it. And if you have the funds, just take a, $100 community college course and find out what's going on in that realm that you love so much in colleges, and so you can learn more, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. You don't have to get a college degree in it or anything,
Yeah.
but get that
It's just a
spark.
course on learning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get that spark back, whether it's that writing, it's that script writing, it's that movie, it's that, I can't tell you how many writers, I'm on a different writing groups, and how many people are like, yeah, since the pandemic, I now started doing XYZ. And it's like, yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I think people should be doing.
We have the time. I mean, well, first of all, I love what you were talking about, just about finding that passion, because one of the quotes on my wall, which I always refer to, because I look at my own life and how things have progressed. It's not changing careers per se; it's adding into your toolbox of knowledge and life experiences. Everything comes together and creates this beautiful melting pot of life, right? But it's allow your passion to become your purpose, and one day it'll be your profession.
Love
and
it.
Profession doesn't necessarily mean you're earning the paycheck with the benefits. It's just, what are you putting out in the world that you embrace? And it could be a personal project, or it could be a hobby, or it could be what you're pursuing and where you want all of your energies to go. Because when you do that authentically, it comes back to you anyway.
100%.
It does.
And what can we do to also provide value to the world? And leading with that and that authenticity. And people will be attracted to you because of that. And not in a, sleazy way or I'm trying to sell you something way. It's just like, you probably, get this when you talk about your work. People are like, I can hear it in your voice. And when I'm on video, I literally can't stop talking. I stop breathing as I'm telling the story. And then my face is lit up and everybody's like, holy crap. Like, I can see them kind of being taken aback in a good way. They're like, I hear the passion in your voice. I see how excited you are about XYZ.
Totally get it.
Right. And I don't know if you're like this, but like every time I go ahead and do my podcasts, I literally am on a high for like 2 hours after. And usually, it takes about an hour to do your podcast. And then, so for 3 hours of my day, I'm on this super high just based on one experience. And that's when I know it's something that I really enjoy and I'm providing value. And it's something that I want to do more of at this time in my life.
Yeah, I love it. I'm the same way. I get jazzed and I feel like, am I rambling? What's going on?
Yeah.
Like, I can control this, but especially when you're a guest on someone else's podcast or TV show or whatever, and I'm asked a question about something I love, forget it, get out of the way. Like, now I'm just like a kid in the candy store, and I call it brain candy anyway. So let's talk about that briefly, in the minutes we have left. I mean, we have the Inclusive Storytelling podcast launching, and, what is your mission? Like, what's the real mission there with this next step in your life?
It is about what we can do from people that are working in the arts being comedy, music, entertainment, fashion, all of it, of how we truly can be inclusive. And the reason is that along with building these spaces where I'm telling people that have been erased from history, the second reason that I'm motivated around this work and the podcast is meant to provide value is, how do we bring safe spaces to the talent that manifests in these different mediums of comedy or storytelling or authorship? Because frankly, the Harvey Weinsteins of the world are around and still continue to be, and it's disgusting. And what they were allowed to do for far too long, it pains me to think about the number of people that we never saw because of these awful gatekeepers. And so it is definitely my mission to be creating safe spaces for people, and so that we can showcase their talent to the world. That's so important to me.
I'm excited to tune in and listen.
Me too, yeah.
And share more about inclusive storytelling and just Ashwini at her best. I love saying your name. It's so pretty. What does it mean again?
Healer of the gods.
Healer of the gods.
Yeah.
Girl, that kind of hits the nail on the head. You ever hear that? Like, your name really does resonate with who you are. Like, my name, Hilary, in Latin means cheerful and merry.
Oh,
isn't that pretty close, right?
Pretty close. Your name, your face, your picture should be next to your name in that name dictionary. So yes, I love it.
All right.
Love it.
As we close shop here, what I love to
Yeah.
do with my guests is I love to do a rapid fire real quick. And
Sure. Let's
basically,
do it.
this is an opportunity. You know this. You were in theater. I'm going to throw out a word, and the first word that comes to mind, I want you to. And we have a visitor. Everybody can't see, but my little kitty cat wants to sit in my lap.
Oh,
Hello, Miss Eliza
perfect.
Doolittle. Miss Eliza Doolittle, by the way, that's my cat, named after My Fair Lady.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful kitty cat.
She just wants
Hi.
to sit here. Hi. Sorry, world. You see enough of her on Instagram anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. This is throwing out a word. And these are words I just kind of picked up during our conversation. I didn't have them pre-planned.
Sure.
Just throw back what you got.
Okay.
Ready?
Well, hold on.
Here we go.
Do you want a one-word answer back or quick blurb back?
Preferably one word.
Okay.
That's rapid.
Got
right?
it.
So
Got it.
Show me what you got, girlfriend. Okay, here we go. Diversity.
Inclusion.
Inspiration.
Representation.
Oppression.
Don't do it.
I'm going to give you that one. Immigrant.
Love.
History.
Learn.
Storytelling.
Fun.
Inclusivity.
Life.
Oh, that's so funny. I was thinking life too.
Nice.
I love that.
This is why we're friends. This is why we're friends.
Girl.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
inclusivity should be just part of your life. Should be just how you operate in the world.
It just is.
It's just so much more fun. I mean, think about the people you meet, their culture, their foods, their laughs, their jokes. So great.
We live in a global village and we need to experience it as such. We are one.
Exactly.
Right?
Build your community. Build that community. And, folks will come and go, and that's okay. Just love them anyway. And, you choose the relationships you have with people, and those will change. And as you evolve, different folks will evolve. But, send them away with love, embrace them with love, whatever and everything in between.
That's really beautiful. I was just going to ask you if you had any final words. So I want to give you a moment if you want to share anything else with our listeners. What is something you would like for them to take from this holistically speaking conversation?
Follow your love and give a little bit of that into the world so that you can serve others. We need you. We need your voices. We need your talents. We need you to find it. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment either. 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes every 2 or 3 days. That's all we need. Put you out there because the world needs you, and don't hold back. Some folks are like, oh, I'm not a social media person or whatever. I get it. Then just give yourself to your circles of influence. Yeah.
And Ashwini Prasad, we need you.
Oh, thanks. We need you, Hilary. Thank you for this.
Thank you for being here. And I appreciate you accepting the invitation and holding space for me as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you create with inclusive storytelling and everything else you're doing on this planet. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. And folks can find me at theinclusivescreenwriter.com. I'm on Instagram as Inclusive Screenwriter, all that fun stuff. But that website gives you everything you need. And I really am looking forward to connecting with people. It's going to be a lot of fun.
You can learn more about Ashwini, her work, and her latest project, the Inclusive Storytelling Podcast, by visiting her website. The link is available on the Holistically Speaking podcast page. And if you have a great story of your own to tell on Holistically Speaking, or would like to learn more about how we can work together, just connect with me on my website at hilaryrusso.com. You can also reach out to me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Hilary Russo. I'd love to hear from you. Holistically Speaking is produced by Alan Seals with music by Lipbone Redding. Connection and alignment are what brought us here today. So thanks for listening, and I appreciate your support. And until next time, be kind to your mind, and don't forget to laugh.